What are the Akashic Records? I know it's a Sanskrit word. Maybe you can break that down for us, your understanding.
Yeah, so it's a Sanskrit word that means space. In the Bible, it's referred to as the book of life. So what the Akashic Records are, it's a field of infinite possibilities. Every word, deed, thought from the moment your soul is incepted is recorded in the Akashic field. Everyone and everything has an Akashic record. And so we can open up your Akashic Records, my Akashic Records, and ask for support in any and all areas of our life. And the masters, teachers, and loved ones, also known as the guardians of the records, are going to share answers with you without any judgment. They understand that you're having a human experience. They understand that you are not perfect and that there are things that your soul wants to experience so that you can evolve. And they're here to support us in evolving. And they take into consideration everything your soul has ever experienced and wants to experience, and everything about your ancestral lineage as well, which is really important because our ancestors influence our beliefs. Our ancestors influence some of the patterns that we have, values that we have. And so they take into consideration all of the whole sum of who you are in this experience and everything your soul has ever experienced as well.
Welcome to a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcasts are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Amy, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you. And before we get started, maybe you could share about who you are and what kind of work do you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'm an Akashic Record Master Teacher and Healer. I love exploring spiritual concepts to assist us in evolving as spiritual beings having a human experience. So I like different modalities like the Akashic Records, crystalline energy, light language, and I take those tools and use it to heal trauma and have a self-discovery, and most importantly, like better myself and assist my clients and students in bettering themselves as well.
Would you mind sharing your upbringing? Maybe, did you come into this world like kind of like enlightened and remembering stuff, or did it gradually happen?
I had a very interesting childhood. So my mom had us very, very young. My mom was, she had my older sister, 4 days before her 17th birthday. She had me when she was 19. So she was a very young mom. And so she didn't even have like a degree. Like she went back to school, learned how to read and write properly when she had 3 kids, and she got her nursing degree. And so for me, I grew up in a very walk on eggshells kind of environment. My stepdad was a severe alcoholic, and he had past traumas that he was dealing with that caused him to behave in a certain way and to lean into alcohol to numb and to escape his pain. And so growing up, I knew things that no one taught me. I didn't grow up in a religious household. I remember at a very young age remembering my dreams. Like my very first memory was when my mom and her then boyfriend broke up before she met my stepdad. And I was 1 year old, and I remember him coming to say goodbye to me. I remember their whole conversation. I could like hear them as I was sitting in my crib. And so as a child, I felt very connected, but I didn't grow up religious. And so that connection was very intuitive. I was always very connected to angels because anytime I was scared or nervous, because my parents would fight a lot, they were big yellers. And so when you grow up in a household full of yellers, that can cause your nervous system to go into flight. And that can cause all sorts of different traumas later on and certain behavior issues later on as well. And so whenever I was scared or whenever I was nervous, I would pray, and no one ever taught me how to pray. Like, we didn't go to church. Like, my mom always said, you can believe in God, you don't have to go to church. And so, but I was very interested in religion and church and spirituality because there was just something on a deep soul level that I knew was there for me to explore. And so, like, I had like a little altar that had angels, and I would pray at this little altar when I was a kid. And so for me growing up, I don't feel like I knew I was enlightened, and I wouldn't use that word, but I knew that I was connected to something bigger, because I just knew something. I knew things that I shouldn't have known because it was never taught to me. And then, going through all the trauma that I went through growing up, like physically, mentally, socially, mentally, and sexually abused, caused a lot of trauma to where I just didn't want to be here anymore in my early 20s. And so what I did was I started tuning in, and I didn't have the languaging at that time, but tuning into what does my soul want? Like, what am I striving towards? And I started receiving downloads. I wouldn't have that terminology then either, but I started receiving intuitive hits that it was important for me to go to yoga. And that was when, like, I really started my healing journey of releasing a lot of trauma from my physical body.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask you a question? Do you work with people that suffer from like alcoholism or addiction? And
Yeah. So, we have, so in Sacred Awakening, one of my programs, it's an Akashic Record program. We have people from all walks of life. And so we've had people that have dealt with addiction. We have had people that have dealt with other forms of trauma. And so I don't like market myself as someone that works with specifically with people with addiction, but we've had lots of students that have had addiction. We all have addictions in different forms. Some is alcohol, some is food, some is our phones, our screens. Like, we're all addicted to something in some way, shape, or form. But how is that addiction controlling us and preventing us from growing is always the question that we want to ask.
well, you notice that they use the word users as addicts are users, and digital people are users.
Yeah.
Use the term user. I guess I asked this question because I try to try to understand addiction more, and I believe trauma is the root of addiction. Would you agree?
I agree, because for me, my mom and my stepdad both have addictions. Now, my mom's not an alcoholic, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have addictions. My mom has her own addictions that cause certain behaviors as well, where someone's quicker to judge someone that's maybe a substance abuser quicker than someone that is, let's say, addicted to shopping or addicted to gambling or addicted to sugar. Like, there's so many different things that we can be addicted to, but the impact of addiction comes down to trauma, because they're in some sort of avoidance, or they're trying to numb, or they're trying to escape, or trying to run away from something they don't want to address.
Yeah, thank you. And the word trauma means wound, inner wounds,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And for example, like my stepdad, him, my grandparents and him, they got into a car accident. I don't know if anybody else was in the car, but back then they didn't have seat belts. And at a very young age, he got into a car accident, and he was thrown from the car through the windshield, had a massive scar across his forehead, and that caused some sort of brain damage. And so sometimes people behave and can have addictions due to other physical traumas that they experienced, that their brain isn't working a proper way as well. And so for me, like, I can sit here and be bitter and mad and angry about things that happened in my past. And yeah, some of them are not fun to look at. And yeah, some of them are gut-wrenchingly hard to even acknowledge or to witness. But at the end of the day, I'm not mad at him, because at the end of the day, I know that he did the best that he could do given what he was provided with. And his choice to lean into alcohol was what he felt was the best option at that moment in time. And once alcohol, or once, let's say, a drug gets a hold of you, it's sometimes very, very hard to detangle yourself from the grasp of that particular substance, because it has a lot of lower vibrational energies that are playing manipulative games with your subconscious and conscious mind.
Can you repeat that? Lower what?
Lower vibrational forces. So with alcohol, alcohol can cause tears in the auric field, which then can cause lower vibrational energies into your energy system that can cause and influence a certain behavior, a certain thought pattern that can keep it ingrained for days, weeks, months, decades.
Are you talking like entity attachments, basically?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because I've talked to my friend Maya about this, and she says the same thing. And Carl Jung used the term spiritus contra spiritum in Latin, right? It means spirits against spirits.
Yes.
The spirits of alcohol, but it also I think it's a portal too. It's inviting these entities in, right? Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. It all depends on the person. And if you've ever watched, if you live near homeless people, and if you ever see like someone that's an addict on the corner, sometimes you'll see them like arguing with themselves or yelling out certain things. Sometimes they're wanting to they're having a psychotic break, or they could possibly be talking to entities or spirits that they're arguing with. And it's quite sad, and it's hard to go, well, they should just get their act together. No, like they really actually need help. They need assistance in getting their act together, because what's required is a deep, deep cleansing. And because there's all sorts of things that can be attached to them over the years of addiction.
Yeah, I think we need to change the prison system as well and try to
I agree with that.
Create a safe place where people can heal from their traumas, because most people in prison have trauma.
Well, I mean, like, look at the fentanyl use. The fentanyl use is an epidemic, and people are dying from accidental overdoses, but there are also people out there extremely addicted to fentanyl. And that's like a whole different extreme of an addiction in itself. And it's sad. But at the same point, I know that if someone is struggling with addiction, they require loving boundaries and support. And the support may be outside support. Not necessarily if that family member is an enabler or someone that's going to enable them because they can't separate the addiction from the behaviors with the person. And so sometimes enablers can cause the person to continue on that path because they don't want to hurt them, but they also, like, there has to be a boundary there too.
So do you think spirituality and spiritualism go together?
What was the last word that you said?
Spiritualism. Like,
spiritual.
Basically, like like we're talking about understanding entities, and how to heal from these entity attachments. Like someone like you helps provide and navigate people and detach these entity attachments from the soul or aura.
Yeah. So I think it's scary for some people to admit that there are darker, lower vibrational frequencies out there. I know that I was one of them at first because I didn't want to see anything like that. I didn't want to experience anything like that. I didn't want to acknowledge it. And the reason why I didn't want to acknowledge it is because I grew up with it my whole life. And it was a very subconscious thing of protecting myself from it. But everybody has things attached to them. Every single person. We can walk in a subway or get on a bus or go into Walmart or go into a store, and you can get something attached to you just by having a conversation with someone if you don't have good energy cleansing practices in place, or if you have fears that you're scared of something, because what these lower vibrational frequencies do, not all of them are evil. Some of them are just confused. Some of these energies are just confused. And they attach to fears. They live off of fears. They also can attach through the electrical system in your body. So your nervous system too. And so there's all sorts of different things that can attach to us. And that's why it's crucial and important not to be naive that these things don't exist.
Fear attracts like a magnet, right? You know, what got me thinking is like, we talk about these elites, right? And why is there so much fear and hatred and all these negative, low vibrational energies being put out on the news and stuff?
You can think about it like this. One, the way we consume things is changing. Like, for example, Joe Rogan has a higher viewership rating than most news channels now, which is kind of incredible to think about. Unfortunately, there's a consciousness that each channel, each platform, each podcast has to it. And so if there's if it's fear-based, there's a lot of fear that can be attached to that particular channel. And for me, it's like, you don't have to fear it. It's standing in your power and acknowledging something's there that doesn't serve us. And so I, for one, I don't watch a lot of news. I do stay up to date on certain things, but there's things that I choose not to participate in that may be a huge headline that's circulating around as a news story, but I know if it's not meant for my nervous system, it's not meant for me to watch. For example, like if there was, like, let's say a murder and someone got murdered or something happened, I know I don't want to watch that. That's not necessary for my soul's evolution. I can know about the story, I can know what happened, but I don't need to watch it. My consciousness doesn't need that. So I'm very, very protective of it. And then as far as like the new, like, I think you have to be vigilant in understanding what you consume impacts you. And so asking yourself, what am I consuming and does this serve my highest good, is crucial. Because like when everything happened with the pandemic, I know for me, I let a lot of my boundaries around consuming news change at that moment in time because I wanted to know what was going on. And then eventually I was like, I'm good. Like right now, what's most important for me, because at that time I was pregnant, but what's most important for me is to protect my body, protect my mind, protect my soul, and protect my baby as I'm growing it. And that's what was most important. And so I think that anytime we're consuming anything, it doesn't have to be news. The question is does this serve my highest good? Is it causing me to have a lot of fear? Or is it educating me in a way to empower me? And so that's what's really important to always like kind of have a different perspective around the things that we're watching. And if there's something in your news feed that's causing you to have all this anxiety, because we create our own algorithms, right?
Yeah.
And so if the algorithm's not working for you, start deleting stuff, start blocking it, because it's not worth over deregulating your nervous system. And have spiritual tools that can support you. One of my spiritual tools is the Akashic Records. Like that's one of my favorite spiritual tools because it helps me get answers on demand for any sort of thing. So it could be dysregulation, or it could be like, hey, what's a good color for me to wear that will make me feel safe today? Or what's something that I can eat that's going to make my physical body feel really good?
Yeah, I appreciate that. before we get into the Akashic Records, which I would love to learn from you, um, why is this type of discussion or conversation hard for people? A lot of people in the spiritual communities don't like, they just don't want to talk about entities or the paranormal, extraterrestrials. Like that's like they separate that. Is that because it's scary or just disbelief? I mean, they talk about the spirit world, like in the 12 step community
Yeah.
in the big book, it says the spirit is broad and roomy. Now I know that's not what they're using it for, but I mean, it really is. It's broad and roomy. There's so many different dimensions and realities and et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So I think there's several reasons why this may occur. Now, this isn't a hard blanket statement for every single person, but it could
Yeah.
be um, education where they just have never heard of these things. And so when they hear it for the first time, it makes them nervous or uneasy or uncomfortable. It could be that they've experienced it their whole life and they just unconsciously don't recognize that they've experienced it. It could be that they're just overall scared of it,
Hmm.
or there's just this innocence of everything's good and that's all there is, or spiritual bypassing. Everything
That,
is love and light. And we must always stay happy. We must all stay positive. And there's nothing wrong with me because I'm doing everything I have to do to be happy and helpful. And that's nice to some degree, but I guarantee you at some point in time, you've been angry and there's something that's annoyed you and something that's made you mad. And it's really important to actually acknowledge those feelings because we've been blessed with feelings in this human experience, and that's a part of the human experience. And when we process our feelings in a healthy way, it allows us to grow and it allows us to evolve and allows us to make space for the things that want to be birthed through us.
can you repeat that spiritual bypassing part again? No, I'm just playing.
Yeah. so,
No.
so spiritual bypassing is huge. So spiritual bypassing is when you don't allow yourself to be negative or you don't allow people around you to acknowledge something that's happened and you always want to be positive. You can think about the statement, good vibes only.
Hmm.
And that's nice, but that's not a factual thing. That's a realistic thing that can happen. And yes, we can be happy, and the majority of the time we can be happy. But there are things, if you're doing the human experience right, there are things that are going to stretch you, that are going to make you feel uncomfortable, because where we grow is outside of our comfort zone. There are going to be people that come into your life that mirror things within you that you do not like. And that's where we can get curious about it. So if we lie to ourselves and say, I'm happy all the time and there's nothing that ever bothers me, that's just not the truth. There's things that naturally are going to bother you. And if they bother you, there's nothing wrong with saying that bothered me. It's about getting curious around, why did it bother you? Why did you have that negative experience? And what ways can you grow from it? Because
Hmm.
if you don't acknowledge what is meant to be acknowledged, that those types of experiences are going to continue to show up, show up, show up, show up until you do the work to say, I've had enough. I understand the lesson. I'm grateful for the lesson. Thank you. And let's move on.
I love that. Thank you. Let's
Yeah,
get
no
into the
problem.
Akashic. Let's get into the Akashic records. What are the Akashic records? I know it's a Sanskrit word. Maybe you can break that down for us, your understanding.
Yeah, so it's a Sanskrit word that means space. In the Bible, it's referred to as the book of life. So what the Akashic records are, it's a field of infinite possibilities. Every word, deed, thought from the moment your soul is incepted is recorded in the Akashic field. Everyone and everything has an Akashic record. And so we can open up your Akashic records, my Akashic records, and ask for support in any and all areas of our life. And the masters, teachers, and loved ones, also known as the guardians of the records, are going to share answers with you without any judgment. They understand that you're having a human experience. They understand that you are not perfect and that there are things that your soul wants to experience so that you can evolve. and they're here to support us in evolving. And they take into consideration everything your soul has ever experienced and wants to experience, and everything about your ancestral lineage as well, which is really important because our ancestors influence our beliefs. Our ancestors influence some of the patterns that we have, values that we have. And so they take into consideration all of the whole sum of who you are in this experience and everything your soul has ever experienced as well.
Yeah, thank you. And that's everywhere in the universe, right? Not just planet Earth.
Yes. Absolutely. So we, as a soul, some souls may be very new to the Earth experience, but they could have had many other experiences in different galactic beings, or they could have been an insect or an animal or a mermaid. Like, I've taken people on all sorts of different. Yeah, a gerbil. Absolutely. It's
Sorry.
crazy. I've had people be like flies. I've had dragonflies. I've had people be like little tiny beings when the dinosaurs lived. There's all sorts of different beings that we can be. The main thing is, it doesn't matter really what you were in a previous lifetime. What matters is, why is that information important to you at this moment in time? Because not all information is important for you to know. One, because it would be extremely overwhelming. And two, we're not to glamorize past lives, because I'll hear someone go, I was a king, or I was a queen in a previous lifetime. That's so awesome that you know that. But why do you know that information? And how is that information serving you? Because usually in a past life, if we're either frozen in time in that past life, or there's a gift from that past life for us to understand and to embody and to use in this lifetime.
I think Edgar Casey called it like the supercomputer.
Yeah. It's like a Google database of your soul. Yeah, definitely.
Some people describe it like a library. Is that an analogy?
That it's an analogy. So the cool thing about the records, and the way that I teach it too, is the guardians are going to share with you in ways that you understand. So for me, when I enter the Akash, it feels like a cosmic field. For somebody else, it might be like a beautiful enchanted forest. Another person, it might look like a library. They meet you where you're at, and how your soul and your psyche will understand and be able to decipher the information that they're sharing with you as well. And that's what's really important. So if someone describes that as a library, that's awesome. Someone describes it as a forest, that's awesome too. The cool thing is not to get attached to it in any particular way, because it evolves as you evolve as a practitioner of the records as well.
So, what's the purpose of these librarians or guardians in the Akashic Records?
So, the cool thing about the guardians is they all have their own mastery. So, the way that I like to describe this is, if the guardians, based on the question you have in that particular moment, are going to be the guardian or guardians that show up to answer the question. And so you might have 3 different guardians show up. You might have hundreds switch in and out during maybe a 20-minute session that you're doing, because they all have their own mastery that they can support you with. So a good example of this would be is, if you needed to go to the dentist to get some dental work done, you're not going to go to a car mechanic to get your dental work done. You're going to want to talk to the dentist, the professional that has that expertise. And so with that, with the guardians, they're switching out based on your vibration, your consciousness, and the questions you're asking and the support you require at that exact moment in time.
So when we die, do we go back there?
To the Akash?
No.
We go into so as a soul, we go into review. And so we go into a different plane of consciousness. We go into a review. We get to experience the lifetime. And so we get to experience it from different perspectives. And this is the cool thing about the Akashic Records is they offer alternative perspectives because oftentimes we get tunnel vision. And so what happens is when our soul transitions, we go into review and then we go into different planes of consciousness, depending on where our soul vibrates, where we've graduated to. Then we get help in that plane. And then once we're ready to graduate from that plane, we go to the next plane. Once we get help from that plane, we go to the next plane. And so if we choose to come back here or there's other lessons to be learned, then we make those decisions. We set up those contracts. We're with our soul family. And then we might reincarnate. We might choose to reincarnate a different way. It all just depends. I know you and I were talking about this book before we started recording, but the autobiography of a yogi. I love the way that he explains when someone transitions. And for me, that feels so true to my soul on the way that he explains it in that book. And when I read that book for the first time and he explained these like different planes of consciousness, I was like, that is so true. And I am so not afraid to die because of that. Because it's just like, it's such a loving thing. And like my stepdad has transitioned and like he's come and visit me after his passing. And I like anytime he shows up, I can tell like where he's graduated to the next level. And even like where he started. Cause like even my mom and I both saw where he started and it's just fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. And the last time he visited me, he was like, I'm going to be gone for a while. So like, cause he's going into this next level of education for his soul, which is, I think it's really cool.
So you're a medium as well?
I wouldn't say I'm a medium like how some mediums are, because that's not my expertise. So like I will have loved ones come through that are my loved ones that have transitioned. Every once in a while, I'll have a loved one come through for a client, but like I have clients that are like, that's their thing. My physical body doesn't like that realm. And so that's not my expertise. And everybody has their own expertise when it comes to their intuition and their gifts on how they're using their intuition to better humanity. Where like I'll have loved ones come through, but that's not my everyday occurrence. It's when something's really important for me to understand, to know, to hear. Like my step grandma transitioned, and I recently filmed for a documentary with Joe Vitale for Zero Limits. And when we were doing the shoot for that, like my step grandma came in and I had this like beautiful experience with her because we were doing B-roll footage on the beach and we were filming footprints in the sand. And growing up, I love my step grandma. She taught me so many different things. One of her favorite poems was the Footprints in the Sand poem. And so it was like she came in and like she just, we had like this beautiful experience, but that doesn't happen to me all the time. Where like some mediums, that's their everyday thing. That's their everyday experience. That's their jam. That's their gift. That is not my gift. It does not make my body feel well. And so like, I'm very, very clear that that's there. Most souls are not going to come to me to talk to me about that stuff.
You know, you brought up autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda. Were you aware when he died? You know that story about when he died? Well, he told his disciples that he was going to die. He gave his favorite speech about India, and then he collapsed. Well, 27 days later, his body did not show any signs of decay. And they actually have the article. I don't know if you've been there in Pacific Palisades in California. I spent a lot of time at that lake because he guided me my first 5 years of my on my spiritual journey. But and I told you I always felt like I lived in India, and then next you know this guy pops up in my awakening, and I never even heard of the guy. But anyways, I would spend a lot of time at the lake. He created this lake. It's called Lake Shrine, and it shows
Yeah.
like the you know well anyways yeah it just it's beautiful. He knew when he was going to die, and his body didn't cave, and they have the article there. You can go there and look at the article and read it and
That's
everything.
cool. I've never been there, but I'm going to
Oh,
look at a picture of
yeah,
it because you'll get just as much benefit by looking at a picture of it versus like if you literally can't go to the location. So I'm definitely going to check that out because I didn't know about the lake. And I believe he was one of my guides too, which I think is really cool, Boo Boo, because like that is, I feel spirits guide us, especially in the beginning of our reawakening journey as
yeah,
adults, where our guides, we have free will. We have to ask for permission for them to guide us, but we'll get synchronicities along the way. And for me, it was yoga, and yoga was a pivotal point in my spiritual journey of like just reclaiming my sovereignty and recognizing that I was whole and I wasn't broken. And so I think that whatever modality you're interested in, follow it, because it's going to lead you to the next thing, lead you to the next thing. It's going to create such a beautiful healing for you.
yeah. Thank you. How did you get access to the Akashic records? How'd that all come about for you?
It was by accident, to tell you the truth. So, I was just following the energy. So for me, I started receiving downloads. I need to go to yoga, so specifically hot yoga. And so once I did that, I would like sit in shavasana after class, and I would be the last one in there for like 20 minutes, just laying and meditating. And I would go into these deep meditations that my soul was starting to crave, like to learn how to meditate. And I decided to move to Charleston to be with my now husband.
I love
And
it
when
there.
I moved there, oh, Charleston's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And when I moved there, I cracked my tailbone for the second time in my life. And so I injured myself. I couldn't do yoga. I was getting super depressed because I was in a foreign place. I didn't have any friends. I was limping. I couldn't do the one thing that I loved. And so I was really, really lost. And I knew that I was starting to feel like I couldn't claw my way out of the dark hole that I was getting in. And I didn't want to go into a severe depression where I didn't want to be here anymore because I've been there before. And so I asked myself, like, what is one thing that I really want to do that would bring me joy? And that was to learn how to meditate and do dream interpretation. And so I was looking for like a psychic, a medium to just help me. And I found my first teacher just by doing a Google search. And she was a transcendental medium, just like Edgar Cayce. And when she gave me this like soul reading, I was telling her on how I would have nightmares all the time and how I really wanted to understand my dreams and how I wanted to learn how to meditate. And she goes, I teach that. Like, I teach that. So if you want to learn how to do this, let's do it. And so I found my first teacher. And that's when I started doing the practices that she was teaching. And then I took her teacher meditation mediumship course. That sounds so fluffy, but it wasn't. And that's where when I started accidentally accessing the records. And then I discovered what the records were, and then I started studying them, and it's just led me down this like whole path of understanding. But that's when I accidentally started accessing them, because we would do this form of communication with God. And so that's when I accessed them. So in the meditation teacher course, it was like so funny because like looking back at it now, I was so naive because I didn't even know what I was signing up for. But it was like, learning how to read auras and mediumship and hands-on healing and exorcisms and all sorts of different strange things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that that's what a meditation teacher did. But it's fun.
That's awesome. How can accessing this information from the Akashic Records promote spiritual growth and in healing for an individual?
Yeah, so it assists with having a self-discovery. That's the biggest component. The Akashic Records is a life tool, and the way that I teach them is you can access the records for the past, the present, and the future. It's really important to have access to all things and not just the past, because if you're only working on things from the past, that can get really heavy. If you're only working on things for the future, that can also blind you from being happy in the present moment. And so you want to be able to work on all fronts. And what they do is they support you in having a self-discovery, because you get curious about your patterns, your behaviors, your thoughts. Why am I doing that thing? Or why do I keep arguing with my spouse? Or why do I not feel seen? Or whatever the questions may be. No question is too big or too small for them. And you don't have to show up perfect. You just can show up. You can show up at like hot mess, and they're going to love on you. And it's a really beautiful, like coming home type of experience.
Yeah, thank you. How do the concepts like destiny or karma or free will relate to the Akashic Records?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the Akashic Records, you have free will. So it is not fortune telling, because you have free will and you can choose what you want to ask. You can choose. They're not going to share things with you without you asking. So that's really important to understand. The other thing is you get to choose if you want to take the advice or not. I know for me, like I've taken lots of the advice, and then I've drug my feet on advice because I don't want to do it, because I'm being stubborn and I'm not ready to have that growth yet. Or it's too much work and I'm okay with doing just the one thing out of there. And I'll give you an example. Like I went in my previous career, I knew that I was going to leave. And so I wanted to get my 200-hour yoga teacher training so that one, I could get over my fear of public speaking. Two, I'd have additional income while I was building my coaching business. And so when I went into the records, I was asking them where I could get a teaching gig, because when I did my 200 hours, I did it one-on-one with someone privately and not with a studio. So it's hard to get a teaching gig at a studio if you didn't come from that studio. And so the guardians are like, go to this studio, say this, and then go to this studio, another studio, and say, I want to observe the kids class. And then go there and do that. Well, the first studio they suggested, I didn't go to. The other studio they suggested about observing the kids class, one, that wasn't even on my radar to even ask. Two, I didn't even think about like teaching kids yoga, but it was a great way to get my foot in the door. And so I asked. He said, no problem. Come observe the kids class. We're having it. Like, it was like, I think within 2 days of when I went in there. And then a couple weeks later, he calls me back and says, hey, do you want to co-teach the kids class? And so it was a way to get my foot in the door. And I would have never done that or even thought about it unless I would have asked the question in the records. And so with the free will, I chose not to do the one suggestion because the other studio was too far away from my house, where this studio was like literally a 4-minute drive and it was easy. Where the other one, there was like, I didn't want to do it. So you don't have to. And that's the cool thing is like, you have free will, but if you keep asking the same question, they're giving you the same answer. They're probably not going to change the answer, because that's the very thing. That's the next step for you to grow and for you to evolve. And they're always going to give you step 1 before step 10. And oftentimes people want to do step 10 before step 1, but you got to do step 1. You're not going to get to step 10 without going through the very first step.
Yeah, thank you. Can you help broaden our lens on timelines, different timelines and parallel lives with the Akashic Records?
Yeah. So we are very, very, very multi-dimensional. And because we're very multidimensional, we can be living out different experiences and scenarios to different things that happen in our life. So let's say you had a girlfriend or a boyfriend in high school that you absolutely love. You guys broke up. Well, maybe on a different timeline that you guys are married and have children, or maybe not married, but you're best friends still. There's all sorts of different scenarios. When we make different choices, there can be another timeline where that other choice you chose not to take is playing out. And this is how we fractile. We also fractile, we fractile through fears, through patterns. And so this is where I call it being frozen in fear. Or let's say you had a traumatic event in a previous lifetime. I like using this example because it's easy for people to understand. Let's say you were hung for being a witch in a previous lifetime. You were persecuted for this. Well, in this lifetime, you might have this really strange fear of speaking up, even though you grew up in a household that allowed you to openly share things without ever being punished. But you still have this fear of being punished, fear of being seen, because you might be persecuted. Well, on a different timeline, you are still being persecuted, and there's a fragment of your soul that is still living out that experience. And until we claim that fragment of the soul, that will always be like that. And so that's why this spiritual work is like so important, because we fractile in so many different ways. And part of our mission in this lifetime is to, one, recognize that we can live heaven on earth in this lifetime, and to, two, recognize that we are whole, we are not broken, and we can reclaim those fragments of our soul, and we can reclaim them in many, many different ways. So the Akashic Records is not just the only tool to do that. There's many other tools, and you got to find the tools that you are the most attracted to. And the cool thing about the records is the records start speaking to people when they're ready to utilize them, and they start getting very loud when it's time, if someone's ignoring the message.
Yeah, thank you. Do you believe we all have like a soul family, guardian angels or spirit guides?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all have guides that watch over us. We have our collective soul family that we travel with together, and some are in body and some are out of body now. And we make different agreements and hold each other to those agreements as well. We also have many soulmates too. It's not just a romantic soulmate that we can have. We can have a soulmate that is our best friend, or a coworker that we instantly have a connection with. We have many soulmates too.
Someone that may be listening that went through like a crazy situation or trauma, they may be thinking like, with the soul family or spirit guides or guardian angels, they'd probably be thinking, well, where were they when I went through this?
Where were they? Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. This is the part where I think it's really crucial to understand. So we have free will, just like your soul family when they embody have free will. And you can make agreements with certain soul family members. You're going to be my mom. I'm going to be your daughter. You're going to be my father. I'll be your son. Or you're going to be my uncle. You're going to be my boyfriend. You're going to be my husband, whatever it is, right? And you make these agreements. You have to remember, you have amnesia coming into this lifetime, just like they have amnesia coming into this lifetime. And how we choose to process our traumas along the way is what we get in the present moment when we're in that particular relationship. And so for example, like I had an agreement with my stepdad that he was going to be really hard on me and be really strict on me. Well, what we didn't agree on was all the abuse. That's not what we agreed on. And he forgot. And so that's one of those things where they can break the agreement or take the agreement too far. Also, we have free will. And sometimes, and this sounds so bad to say sometimes because it's gut wrenching, because it's hard for people to understand. Bad things happen to good people. And sometimes those experiences were not pre-planned, but they fit the timeline for your soul's destiny. And so sometimes the experience can come in because it fits your destiny path. And it's hard to understand because we don't want someone to die. We don't want someone to go through a traumatic event. We don't want someone like a child to pass away really soon. But we don't understand what their soul's path was either. You have to also consider that sometimes a soul may come in that understands that it's taking on a tremendous amount of ancestral karma. And so they come in with certain disabilities and they want to transition right away. And that's okay. That's what their soul wanted. That was what their soul wanted to experience. And they're releasing a ton of karma from the ancestral lineage in processing that. Or they might not be releasing ancestral trauma. They might be releasing old karma for their own selves, or to have a different understanding or a different perspective, or have a different level of empathy that they didn't have because of previous souls' experiences as well.
Yeah, thank you. What would you describe the ego versus the soul?
Yeah, so the ego is from this may be not a popular opinion, but it's my opinion.
I
But the
appreciate
ego
it.
is along for the ride, and the ego is here to support you in evolving. And the ego's job is to keep you safe. The ego's job is to also create different experiences so that you can understand where you are separated from your wholeness. And so we're not to banish the ego. We're not to check the ego at the door, because you are going to get yourself in a world of hurt if you do that. The main thing is to befriend the ego and to ask it to come along for the ride as a curious student. And this will allow you to evolve a lot quicker than if you check the ego at the door, because what happens is this is an aspect of you that's not going anywhere. The ego is a part of the human experience. The ego says, hey, beware of that person. They have ill intentions. Or, hey, there's a cliff over there. You might fall off. Or, hey, hot fire, don't burn yourself. The ego's there. It's a part of the human experience. It is a part of the awakening process to assist the ego in evolving as you evolve as well. And so the ego and the soul are like two best friends, sometimes like siblings that can't stand each other, but they're part of each other's journey. And you got to figure out how to get along and how to befriend this aspect of yourself that isn't going anywhere. And you can't lock it in a dark room, because you're not going to evolve if you do such a thing.
Yeah, thank you. I love A Course in Miracles, but here's if I don't agree with when it comes to the ego, or Eckhart Tolle talks about the ego. It's like, I always say in the religion they call it the devil, and in the New Thought they call it the ego, and then in the 12-step community they call it the disease. But it really, like, your ego is your sense of identity. Like, if I'm about to fall off a cliff, my ego's gonna let me know it's
Yeah.
dangerous. I'm gonna fall off but I do believe, like, I always say, when the ego's not your amigo if you're unconscious of it. And once you it can be unhealthy. It can create an unhealthy we can create an unhealthy ego, through trauma, fears, wrong perception, all that, lack of coping. But you can create a healthy ego, and I feel like I have a
Mm-hmm.
healthier ego today than I did before,
That's
through this
awesome.
spiritual work. But I don't think it's a bad thing anymore. I always say my will's my friend today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what ends up happening is this aspect of yourself feels seen and heard, where
Mm.
if it feels seen and heard, it's not going to act out like a child. It's going to show up for the occasion. And if it does act out, that's where you go, why did I just do that? What part of me wants to evolve today? Because there's something that's trying to get my attention. And the thing about the ego is you are much more than just your ego. You are much more than just your physical body. You have a mental body. You have a spiritual body. You have an inner child. You have an emotional body. All these different aspects of you influence your behavior and your perception of love, and they are tied to the past. And the more work you do, you assist them and you assist yourself from unshackling to the past and coming closer and closer and closer to the present moment until the point where they are in the present moment.
Yeah, thank you. I love how you talk about past life trauma. We can bring that baggage into this present life.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't talk about that. You don't even hear it in science. I mean, I think they're talking a little bit of, epigenetics. Maybe could share a little bit about that. But yeah, I totally believe in past life trauma. It totally makes sense to me. You also do trauma healing work, and I would love for you to share on that and maybe the shadow. What's the shadow?
Yeah. So, as far as past lives, with past lives, anytime you have something that's going on and you've tried all sorts of different things to work through it and it didn't work, chances are there's probably a fragment of your soul that's frozen somewhere. And so that's where having a past life regressions can be really, really helpful in that type of work. And then, and I teach like my Akashic Record practitioners in our second level, which is our Healers Edition level, how to use the Akashic Records to heal and do past life regressions. In level 1, we do past life regressions for ourselves. So the trauma work is, there's big T trauma, little t trauma. So, and how you perceive trauma can be different than how someone else's perceives trauma. And all of us have had some sort of experience of trauma along the way, whether it be big or little. And that trauma gets stuck in our bodies. It gets stuck in our cells. And what happens is if we don't extract it, we don't let it go, we don't acknowledge it, we don't release it, what ends up happening is it will create a state of frequency that will keep you in that state until you're willing to do something different. And everything is energy. And so what's going to happen is you're going to keep reinforcing that trauma into your energy field by attracting certain experiences over and over and over again that reinforce those beliefs. So if let's say like you believe that you're not that smart, that you're stupid, or you're unworthy, you're going to attract people and experiences. You raise a hand, right? Attracting people and experiences that reinforce that belief over and over and over again. And so we can go into the records and we can uncover what the trauma was. And then we can start working on the trauma and shifting our perspective and shifting our frequency so we stop attracting those very things. And sometimes it's just as simple as acknowledging you had this experience when you were a child and then talking to the inner child. And then all of a sudden you feel better. That it could be as simple as that, where sometimes it takes a little bit more work if it's something bigger, where it might take maybe a few sessions going into the records, or it might take months of working on a similar concept, but you peel back one layer at a time, you feel better each time you do it. And then you evolve and dissolve it. And so we are onions and we are constantly peeling back layers. And this is that yo-yo effect that sometimes we experience where it's like, I've addressed this 10 times. Why is it coming up again? And it's not because you didn't do the work properly in the beginning. It's just a new layer for you to look at. And we got to acknowledge that it's a layer and it's okay that it's coming up to look at again. And that's perfectly okay. And I think that that's crucial to understand, because sometimes our nervous system can't handle it all at once, and neither can our psyche.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Have you ever looked at the 12 steps before?
I haven't. To tell you the truth, I've never looked at the 12 steps before.
I'd love to get your take on them.
I'll have to look at it, because I've had so many people ask me about them, but I haven't ever looked at the 12 steps. But I know that I've had friends that have gone through the 12 steps and they become very religious. And so I think that whatever helps you is perfect. And then just keep following the energy, because you might evolve past the 12 steps that lead you into something different that supports you in evolving.
Yeah, it becomes really religious and dogmatic for some people. Mm-hmm. For me, it's just very spiritual, and I hold it like a loose garment, Yeah. Like it's not my identity.
Well, I think that's really important with anything, right?
Yeah, with anything.
You take what resonates and you leave behind the rest. And for me, like, I'm not a religious person, but I love certain things from certain religions that totally resonate with my soul. And then there's other aspects that don't resonate. And so I just leave those behind and take what resonates. And then I just allow my soul to know what's true for me, because my truth doesn't have to be your truth.
Yeah, I do the same thing. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I also learned how to live and let people have their beliefs, and don't try to control them. And they're not against me, or, I could let them be. And, so it's a beautiful thing when you get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the spiritual law of allowing. Like, that allowance allows us to have compassion and empathy without trying to force someone to do something that they don't want to do. We can't make someone do something they don't want to do. And it's just, you got to allow them to have their own soul's journey, because that's a part of their soul's path, not yours. And part of our soul path is to learn that art.
Yeah, thank you. You talk about DNA activation. What is that?
Oh, I love DNA activation. So we have like trillions of cells in our body, and majority of those have DNA in them. And for a long time, they said, you got 12 strands of DNA, the rest are junk. Well, that's simply just not true. We have all the DNA strands in our body holds information. And so it holds ancestral information. It holds soul lineage information. It holds beliefs, patterns, gifts, all sorts of different things. And so throughout our lifetime, we are meant to activate our DNA. And we can activate our DNA naturally through meditation, through experiences, through movement, through spiritual practices. And while we're activating our DNA, we are awakening to new truths. We're harnessing gifts. We are letting go of ancestral trauma, our own personal trauma, our old soul trauma. And as we're doing that, we grow and evolve. Well, you can't activate all of your DNA at once. One, your body and your brain and your psyche would combust, because we just can't handle that much energy. We have to gradually open up the hose slowly. And so one of the things that you can do is you can intentionally activate and restructure the DNA. And so doing all the spiritual work is great. And then you can intentionally go and activate it. And so twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, I'll intentionally go in and I'll activate 24 or a little bit more strands of DNA that want to be activated. And when we activate the DNA, we are releasing all sorts of encoding that's been placed upon the body grid and the earth grid. These are called seals. And these particular seals make you act, think, and believe in a certain way. So they can cause you not to access your intuition fully. They can cause you to have spiritual guilt, like God is going to punish me. they can cause you to separate from the reality that you are loved unconditionally. And so we remove these cells and then we activate DNA. What is activated in the DNA is unique to the person and to that experience when we do the DNA activation, because sometimes people harness new gifts. Sometimes people break free of old patterning. Some, like I've had someone where we've done it, like she had like a toe fungus and all of a sudden the toe fungus healed. Another person was like, I just got a job promotion, like, because they opened up their worthiness. And so, for me, it's always fun to see like what type of results I get from it. Like, so the last time I did our DNA activation, I did one just in June, I think. Was it June? I'm looking at my calendar because I literally May. Okay. And then the time before that, I did it in November of 23. And so the November of 23, that DNA activation like took my light language to a totally different level and understanding of trances and how people are in trances. Where this one is working a lot with me on ancestral belief systems and money beliefs. And I have a really good relationship with money, but this is like, it's showing me some really big blind spots that I didn't realize that I even had around my relationship with money. And so, every time is different. Every time is so unique to the person. And, it's just a lot of fun. Like, it's just a different way of experiencing something that's different without having to have a lot of work to do with it.
Yeah, thank you. And you brought up something. How does spirituality and money mix?
Oh, they mix very well, in my opinion. So, money is simply just energy. We are energy. We're exchanging energy. This is how we exchange goods and services right now, is through the form of money. Some people barter, some people trade still, you know. So that in terms of money and money belief systems, like I know that some people believe that like, rich people are evil, or they might go, if you're spiritual, you're broke, or you can't make money as a healer, any of those types of things. I don't believe in that at all, like whatsoever. I believe that there is enough money to go around, that we will always be provided for as long as we're open to receive it. Oh, and the thing about spirituality that I think there's a really big misconception around, well, if that healer is truly a healer, why are they not offering their services for free? Well, we're not in the old ages where there was a village healer and the entire village took care of the healer. And so if they needed something from the healer, they would bring mangoes, or they would bring tea, or they would bring meat, or they would bring little different things that they would trade for, but the village healer was taken care of. Well, nowadays that's not the case, where if you're providing a service, there has to be an even exchange for it, even if it's not money. And like, so for me, in like my business, I offer a ton of stuff for free. Like, I have a podcast, I have free healings. I just got done doing a 2-week masterclass series for free on the Akashic Records. Like, all of that is free and people get a ton of benefit. Could I charge for it? Absolutely. But it's so much fun and I have so much fun, and like the impact it has on the community is really awesome. And then if you want to go deeper, you can buy this thing that allows you to go deeper on whatever that is, but it's not a requirement. And that's the thing about the spiritual community, where it's like this taboo to charge. There's no taboo. Like, you got to charge for your service. If you don't, you're going to get sick, because there's not an even exchange of energy there. And that goes for anybody. It doesn't even matter if you're a healer, if you're a carpenter, if you're doing a coach or doing some other form of service, if you're undercharging for your service and you're not charging what you're worth, the exchange is not equal. You are going to get sick in some way, shape, or form. You'll either be disenchanted with your work. You're going to have people that keep showing up, that keep causing you to have problems. But if you actually charge what you're worth, you're going to get the people that actually understand what you're worth and are willing to pay what you're worth as well.
Yeah, thank you. How would you define abundance, and how do we manifest that? Because I know you teach that.
Yeah. So for me, you often hear like abundance or prosperity, where or being rich. People think it's like money, and it doesn't have to do with money. It's an embodiment. It's this whole appreciation of joy, enthusiasm, bliss, ecstasy that you get to have in all areas of your life. There's this embodiment process of joy that occurs when you start perceiving yourself as abundant. And so it's an identity shift around what you are and who you get to be. And that is abundant. Like, you get to be abundant, and every asset and every facet of your life can be abundant. And it is your birthright to have that. And when you stop separating yourself from your wholeness, from your God self, or from your divinity, whatever sacred title you give that, and you start recognizing, like, I am whole and I deserve to be happy. And this is where that like living heaven on earth in this lifetime concept comes in. It's like, you don't have to wait until you transition to have that bliss and to have that ecstasy. When you live in gratitude shows up and supports you and makes you more abundant.
Yeah, thank you. I just was talking to someone that that's a hardcore Christian, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's their path. But we're talking about light language and speaking in tongues. You know, that's a form of light language, right? What is light language?
Speaking in tongues is light language.
Because they were saying that, if other people that use light language is probably channeling the devil. That's devil stuff because it ain't coming from the Holy Spirit. What's your take on that? And what is light language?
So light language is the cosmic language of your soul. Not everything that someone channels is love and light. So let's just get that very like clear. Like, they could be possibly channeling a lower vibrational frequency. Possibly. It just depends on what radio station they're tuned into, right? And so when it comes to light language, it is speaking in tongue. Whatever terminology you want to use and what you resonate with is great. Like, we don't have to pick apart the name, right?
Yeah.
The main thing is where is that information coming from? Because that's really important. And with light language, there's different forms of light language. So you have your spoken, you have movement, you have signing, and you have written. Every sound, movement, sign, symbol holds paragraphs of information that we don't have the human language for. We can have the essence of what it means, but we don't have the human language for it. And so light language is a very important part of our soul's evolution. And so how you consume light language is really important, because you want to have discernment on if that's in alignment with your soul's path or not. And not in just because it's not in alignment doesn't mean that that person's light language is bad. It's just not a frequency match for your soul. There's lots of light language out there that I don't listen to, and it's not because they're channeling something evil. It's because they're channeling something really beautiful, but it's not a frequency match for where I'm going or what I'm working on in that particular moment. And so it's really important in anything with spirituality and anything in life is to have discernment. But the thing about Christianity or different religions, we're all talking about similar things. We just have different labels for it. And different degrees of acceptance as well, because depending on the religion or the sector of that religion, there's these different rules that people abide by. And so the question is what works for you, what doesn't work for you, take what works and leave behind the rest. And it's okay for other people to have different paths than what you're on, because we don't have to have the same path. One, if we had the same path, it would be really boring. And two, we would all be the same, and that would be very boring as well. Like, that's what makes this experience really cool, is because there's so much diversity. There's so much flavor and color that we get to experience. And because there's so many different perspectives out there, and because there's so many different flavors that we get to experience and colors that we get to experience along our journey, this allows us to create identities with an S that supports our evolution, or allows us to have an experience that teaches us something to evolve.
Yeah, thank you. How do we watch out for false light entities? Because you said it's not always good, right?
Yeah, that's the discernment piece. So it's like there's so many people out there that are working with different beings that you always want to ask, like, are they really of light? Because things can be cloaked in light and they're not really of light. There's lots of beings out there that pretend to be angels and they're not angels. And so the key is to, one, study. How you study and what teachers you follow are really important as well. Find teachers. Having community and teachers, I think, is really important, because it allows you to fold time. And so find the teachers, find the groups that allow you to grow, and use discernment, because not everything that, one, we never want to put a teacher on a pedestal, because you're taking away from your own power. And no one's your guru. Like, no one is your guru. Like, you are your own guru, and you get to decide what is right and what is not right for your soul's path. You get to decide how quickly you do it. You get to decide how quickly you want to grow, and if you want to take the long way around or the short way around, depending on what it is that you're working on that particular time. But the main thing is to remember, you are empowered, and you have the power to change. You have the power to heal, and that teachers or schools of thought or particular practices, they're here to support you in recognizing that you are powerful and you have the ability to evolve and to change and to be exactly who you were meant to be in all of your glory in this lifetime.
Yeah, thank you. You know, and that's what Yogananda showed me with his fellowship that he started, Self-Realization Fellowship. He goes, he clearly told me, and I could feel him going like this, that they're worshiping his self-realization and they're forgetting about their self-realization.
Yeah.
And the two big schools, that Self-Realization Fellowship and Ananda Fellowship, actually took each other to court, arguing over his teachings and stuff. Wow. And if you look, you'll look, one of them taking one A out, and there's an extra A in his name. And that's how you know if it's either Self-Realization Fellowship or Ananda Fellowship. Pretty interesting.
Isn't it so fascinating? Because it's supposed to be about love and light. And this is the thing. There can be disagreements. And there is deep understanding and opportunities for evolving, just in like that experience that you're talking about, that people can learn from. And, you know, you're not meant to be with a teacher forever and ever, because if you are, there's something that either you're not doing to stretch, or you could be with a teacher for a really long time, but you definitely want to ask yourself, where am I not allowing myself to grow fully without with myself, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for your journey. No one else is responsible for it.
Yeah, thank you. Can we end it with like a quick question we were talking about?
Yeah.
With the Akashic Records?
Yeah. So I can do a personal, I can answer a personal question for you, and then I can do a guided general message for your listeners / viewers.
Yeah, how about a personal?
Sure. Okay, what's your question, my dear?
I feel like there's a blockage, like it's kind of hard to want to do a 9 to 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you have an awakening, for some people, like myself included, and like I feel like a little bit, okay, what am I supposed to do? Like I want to help people, I want to, do something to be beneficial to humanity and in the spiritual world, but I feel like there's a blockage, even like when I'm trying to write, and there's still a belief that I'm not good enough. But I feel like I'm trying to write a book right now, and I have all this information, but I can't put it into words. I feel some kind of blockage.
That's so two things. Part, your ego is like, he's angry about, he's angry. Let me come back to that, because I just see him angry. Okay. But then there's, I don't know what happened to you when you were 12 years old, but I see your 12-year-old inner child, that there was this shift. So you went from super bright light to gray. So that tells me that that's when you started dimming your light at 12. And so part of this is going to be talking to your 12-year-old inner child while you're writing your book. So inviting him to be with you, but taking one day off from doing anything. And it's just you and your 12-year-old inner child, and you're going to go do all the fun things you used to do when you were 12.
Okay.
What's one thing that you remember that you used to love doing when you were 12?
That's a good question. Play basketball.
Perfect. You can go to the park and you go play basketball.
Yeah.
Or get a group of friends and say, hey, let's go play some basketball together, even just one person. And then, and I'm hearing I don't know if you have a membership to the YMCA, but the YMCA has basketball court. And so I just heard tell you about the Y. So that might be something that you might want to look into. The other thing about, it's time for you to transmute some old anger. So that's where the ego was showing up really angry. And so one of the things that you can do is uncensored journaling. Anybody else that this resonates with, this message is for you too. So uncensored journaling allows you to get old emotions or even thoughts or feelings or beliefs that you didn't realize that you were holding on to in your subconscious out. And so one of the things that you can start with, and you can set a timer, you can set it for 5 minutes, because if you're making up excuses, I don't have enough time, just set a timer for 5 minutes. You're just, I'm going to do this for 5 minutes. Okay. And you're going to start with, I'm angry about, and then just start filling in the blank. Allow your pen to start flowing, and do not be politically correct. And so if all of a sudden you realize you're angry with someone, write it down and say why you're angry. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about being politically correct. Just write it out. If you end up sharing a bunch of things on that paper and you're nervous that someone else is going to read it, take it, shred it, rip it up, burn it, do whatever it is that you need to do with it to destroy what was in there. But the main thing is to get it out of your body. And by uncensored journaling, and I see you doing this 3 days in a row, because the first day it's just going to be surface level. The second and third day, if you can do it for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, that's going to be really big, and see where it takes you. And it's okay if it all of a sudden goes into something positive. It's okay if it goes into something completely off in left field that you're like, I wasn't even thinking about that. Because oftentimes when we uncensored journal, we'll uncover something that you didn't recognize that was bothering you. And it could be something that your partner did. It could be something that happened 3 years ago. It could be something that on a conscious level, you're like, There is no reason to be upset about that. Why am I holding on to it? Because it's not rational. Like, it's not rational. It doesn't have to be rational for us to be impacted by something. And so uncensored journaling, and this is going to clear that block for you really quickly. But the whole playing with your inner child is going to make the project fun, because you're not having fun with it. You're beating yourself up over it, is what you're doing. You're overcomplicating it. And if you go and play more, this invitation to play while you write will be there.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, my dear. And then, one more thing. What I also saw is like, this, heaviness in the heart, like the whole heart system, like your whole front of your chest. That is because you're afraid that if you expose yourself in this vulnerable way, that you're going to be seen in a different way and people might not like it. And so giving yourself permission to be vulnerable, and you can even uncensored journal about some of those fears, that's going to help you approach the book in a different way. And then also working with some crystals, like you can just be laying down and have like a crystal on your chest that will like help kind of clear up the energy. You can do selenite, you can do any like perfect. That's the perfect piece. Yeah. You could, when you're laying down, watch TV, doing whatever, you just place that on your chest, because that's flaky. Make sure you have a shirt on, or put like a rag or a paper towel underneath it, just so the flakes just stay on that. But yeah, I think you're going to do great. And I honestly feel that the book will be a huge success if you allow yourself to be completely raw and vulnerable in it. It's going to be big.
Thank you. I appreciate that. How can we find you in your links, and what kind of work do you have to offer?
Yeah. So you can go to theamyrobeson.com/free, theamyrobeson.com/free. I have 20 plus free Akashic Record healings that I've done all in the Akashic Records that you can sign up for. I have a YouTube channel, a podcast. The podcast is called Awakening with Amy Robeson. You can go to my website, theamyrobeson.com, and check out the podcast. I do free events all throughout the year. So we just got done with the Akashic Record, which is called the Soul Evolution Masterclass series. So we'll probably do another DNA event before the end of the year. I'm not sure when this is coming out, so it just depends on when. But just sign up for our email list, and you'll get notified whenever we're doing a free event. And I'm always doing something for free, so it's really fun. Like we just did like free group Akashic Record readings the last 2 weeks, and it's been a ton of fun. So yeah, so just go to theamyrobeson.com, ROBESON.
Yeah, thank you. In a few words, what would you say is the purpose of life?
To be fully, authentically ourselves and on purpose, and to just be the most that we are supposed to be. So in our grandest glory.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for coming on. I'm going to end it with a quote by Linda Howe.
Perfect.
The idea of the human experience is to become in the physical the perfect self that already exists in the Akasha at the soul level. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a play. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on the day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.